Good evening. Welcome to the fifth in this series of Bill's Design Talks. This year we're trying to have a star in each of 8 disciplines, and this is the fifth star you're going to meet, Scott Wilson, who's an industrial designer, but he's also an amazing entrepreneur. He's showing how design can be an inventor and an entrepreneur as well as a designer, so I'm really looking forward to his presentation. He's going to talk for about 45 minutes. Then I'll join him on stage. We'll have a little conversation. Then we'll ask you to join us and join in. And we're streaming, so everything's live. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. So please, Scott. Welcome. See you in a minute.
I don't think I've ever done this before in front of a studio. How's everyone? Thanks for coming. I know it's terrible weather out there. Just to kind of get an assessment of the audience, like how many students are in the audience? Too many. Professionals mostly in general? Okay. Well, thanks for coming. I think this presentation is more about the entrepreneurial and startup side of my business and my life. And I think that's probably a pretty relevant topic these days. There's a lot of buzz around things like Kickstarter and different crowdfunding platforms right now. So if you didn't already have starting up your own thing in your mind before, you probably do at this point, I would imagine. And I just wanted to kind of talk about in general in the beginning here about some of the things that I think are necessary to go out on your own, because I also see a lot of people just winging it, and it's going to have a backlash soon. So I think I'm all for it. I think it's great, but I just wanted to kind of like get you guys some thoughts and on how I see how to be successful in it. So what does it take to kind of be an entrepreneur, a design entrepreneur? I think the obvious things, which most designers already have, is curiosity on how to make things better, confidence not only in your vision, but also a humble confidence in the way that you kind of approach people and partners and vendors, and it just makes life a lot easier if you're not arrogant. So I think what's the saying, like confidence without humility is arrogance. So you got to be very careful there. And passion goes without saying. Without passion, you're not going to be successful as far in design, because it really comes down to the extra effort that goes into design to make it successful. And experience. There's a lot of people kickstarting things and starting things with not much experience right now, and it's great and fun, and there's a lot of tools that allow you to visualize things these days and get people excited. But the experience, if you don't have it, you should be seeking out people that do have experience to kind of give you advice. Otherwise, you maybe sending me an email, like all the emails I get, asking me, "My God, I'm successful, but what now?" So from experience, I wouldn't say you need all this experience, but I've worked at 3 consultancies, twice at IDEO with Bill, 4 corporations, and 5 startups. I realized when I first put this presentation together, it's over 20 years of kind of learning and wearing a lot of hats and trying to develop a range and diversity of skill sets. And, it's actually a lot of it's condensed in the last 10 years more so than the previous 10 years, because things changed a lot around 2000. And I was at Nike, Motorola, and a bunch of kind of great design cultures at that point in time, and some of those cultures. And a lot of times those cultures change, like you're there at a good time and then it changes completely. So you got to time it right, which I've had a really good knack for timing things right, depending on where I was. So I think, but one of the other things that maybe differentiates entrepreneurs and visionaries from just regular dreamers is courage, because you have to be naive or really brave to kind of just go for certain things. And I've having to do it far too many times, and I'm lucky I'm still married. But my wife is a saint, and she's really supported me all along the way. I think this is a book by 10 Steps Ahead by Eric Colonius that is interesting. There's a lot of interesting things in there, from what really drives people to be an entrepreneur over and over and over again, and more of a serial entrepreneur. Everything from like the science of dopamine and how it affects you, and it's an interesting read. It kind of makes you understand why you put yourself through that kind of pain sometimes. And Seth Godin's a great motivational writer and speaker, and this is just a real quick read as well. But it kind of goes along with like IDEO's mantra of fail early and often, and you learn a lot from failing. And I've definitely failed in different ways along the way, and you just kind of bounce back and you take that learning and apply it to the next thing. But one thing also not to overlook is that it's very appealing, this kind of like the 1% inspiration and the glossy picture and the design that you put up there and everybody reacts to, but ideas are kind of basically worthless without execution. And that's the famous Thomas Edison saying 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. Is very true. I mean, it's like I spend a ton of time on the back end making sure things are going to be executed, or hire people to do that. Because once you launch a product to market, it absolutely becomes a time vampire, and you'll be lucky if you get back to designing anytime soon, unless you find the people to surround you that know how to execute things. I mean, I kind of know how to execute things, but it's always better to find people that are better at it than you, I think. And basically, whether you're working for someone else or yourself, creating something new is hard. Whether you're in a corporation or anything, it's a lot of work, and don't underestimate that. And and really, luck has a lot to do with it as well. Thomas Jefferson saying it's very true. Like things seem to, like one of my GM in my lunatic business just swears I walk around with a horseshoe up my, and it's like the serendipity that he sees happen, and it really is just, well, it's luck, but it's really working hard and making those connections and being honest with people, and I think things just fall in place, which is nice thing to have, I guess. I can't complain there. So just at a high level, I wanted to talk about Minimal and how the division of time that we spend at Minimal, and it's a really kind of a balanced formula that is organic, and we don't have a lot of structure and process, but I try to keep this balance of, about 1/3 fee-based work for clients. We do about another, for some reason to go, another third royalty and equity combined, and then the last third is these kind of ventures of self-manufacturing. So we try to keep it. I tend to err on the side of too much venture and equity and risk, and that scares the heck out of my wife. But we try to keep this good balance, and actually it's a good balance because they also complement each other on inspiration as well. It's like stuff you were doing over on the fee-based work somehow benefits the venture or equity stuff, and vice versa. And I really like that balance. I've always been a believer in being really balanced, and that's why I always had things on the outside of my corporate jobs as well, just to stay in shape, because you wouldn't want to go to the gym and do just one exercise, because that wouldn't be good. And unfortunately, corporate America tends to put you in one little silo and tells you to get really good at that, and then that's not, I think, how designers are actually wired and should be handled. So my 5 startups, the first one is kind of funny, and I didn't really think of it as a startup, but it actually was, and it was nice that it started out simple, even though it wasn't so simple. And don't underestimate how hard things are, and I think some things that seem simple are actually hard. So my first startup was actually inspired by just a funny sketch and joke at lunch, and actually it got a ton of press and fanfare, and it was in like the MoMA, I think, and stuff like that, which is like, I just find it, after everything I've done, that this ends up being popular. But it was really just a commentary on people's addiction to technology and Apple, and this was before Apple got really big. I mean, this is like 2003 or 4. But it was fun. We had fun with it. We actually, and I think what blew people away is like, it wasn't just a rendering online. We actually made it. We went to the watch manufacturers that we had at Nike and actually made the thing. Had the same ball bearing snaps that a lot of watches use on bezel. So everything fell into place, and we made a few thousand of them, and we put them online, and they sold out, and we gave the money to St. Jude's Hospital outside of the cost, and it was a fun project. It actually took off virally, like early days of Google, really in a way, and it was like 20 pages of direct hits on this particular thing. I think it was so controversial, was that one of the reasons why. But we had like 250,000 people go through our store in one week, and I was like, man, that's a lot of traffic. And so what I learned with that little startup, it was there and it was gone. But it was like, don't be afraid to do something controversial, but then also maybe think about what you're going to have in your store, that if they come there for that, to check that out, they're probably not going to buy it, so you better have something else that they're going to buy. So it's kind of one of those concept cars or whatever that bring people in and then they buy something else. Startup 2 was really inspired by, we were renovating our house in Portland. Everything was looking great except for basically the nursery. And it was an embarrassment, and it was very temporary and very bad, just bad. And I think they had, at that time in New York, David Netto was here, but there was really nothing, and Oof maybe, and there was really nothing in the baby market. So, I actually ended up running around the country and sourcing like wood from the Carolinas, wire from Rockford, Illinois, fabric from LA, and this was all on the side at night on the weekends while I was at Nike, and we launched that bassinet in 5 months and got it shipping around the beginning of the year. I have to remember what year that was, 2005, I think. And we went through safety approvals and all that, and it was pretty. It seemed painful, but it was pretty fast. And then, it launched and it got a ton of press just on the blogs, and, all the retailers came to us, which was very interesting, being that it was back then. I think I put it out in Mocha Loca to begin with. And so that was a nice little product line, and we got and it was also supposed to live longer in the house. It was like the bassinet was a 4 to 5 month use product, but it was like $600. So when it was done, the bassinet top went on the floor for a pillow bin, and then we put a really nice, generous Baltic birch type of tabletop on it that they used on the Ames surfboard, same stock of material. And actually, we still use that as a play table today when my kids are 8 and 5. So it had this longer use than just the temporary baby furniture. And the crib transitioned to a day bed and to a toddler bed. And the rocker, we never made it out of the gate with. I paid for all the tooling. And then we ended up making 2, and then basically between the economy and some partnership issues, we ended up putting that on hold. So what I learned with that was I was doing cash flow modeling in Excel, which the other side of my brain actually really liked. I realized that bootstrapping is really hard when you're trying to fund it yourself. I didn't know anything about going to raise money at that point. Managing a supply chain is really, really, really hard. And then what was nice about creating something, getting it out of the gate and getting that kind of press is I was able to go to Davidson Plyforms and Genesis Seating, who make all the Ames furniture, the Noguchi table, and a lot of the modern classics. And I was able to get them interested in a new product line, which they hadn't done in a long time. So then it was all under one roof, and all I had to do was pick up a phone and say, I want 1 to go to Minnesota and 100 to go to Design Within Reach. So it was actually nice, and I didn't have to worry about a rubber foot not showing up, so I couldn't ship product at that point. So that made my life a lot easier. And then the safety approvals were hard in itself, but then also translating what the government means in these specs is also really hard. And then partnering is really my first partnership, and it's like marriage, and we know what happens to half of those. So so you want to partner for life, I guess. And then at that point, I was actually doing that overlapping while I was at Motorola, and I was moved back to Chicago. And but it's tough to go from Nike to Motorola. It's probably better to go to Motorola to Nike as far as culture. And it just wasn't sitting well with me. And they just announced the iPhone, and 6 months after they announced the iPhone, I just left, grabbed the iPhone, went to a coffee shop, and started Minimal. And that was, I didn't know what I was going to do actually, but luckily some people called, and it was actually mostly relationships of people that I worked with before at Nike that went on to Microsoft or Dell, and that was kind of how Minimal started. And we've kind of grown from into more of a full product end-to-end firm. We can do a la carte, but we tend to like to do the full gamut all the way through because it's again comes down to execution. We actually know how to execute. I kind of underestimate our experience a lot of times. I think you just tend to do that a lot. But we tend to try to pick partners that want to go the full way through with us. And we're based in Chicago. We're in our 5th year. We've got, last count, 22 people. We've got another couple starting next week, but we're in 2,000 square feet that you see there. So it's a lot. That's like beginning days. It's like 6 people. It's a lot tighter than that right now. And we're probably moving, fingers crossed, to like a 12,000 square foot space over this summer. So I'm excited about that. At minimal, I think there's also whether you go off and do your own thing or start and become an entrepreneur or not outside. I mean, we have the fortunate opportunity to work with a lot of internal entrepreneurs, which I think are also very important in these design champions. And I venture to guess that most designers and consultants, if it's worth putting in your portfolio and you're proud of it, you've probably had somebody on the other side of the fence fighting for what the vision was throughout the process. Otherwise, it's maybe not worth showing most of the time, I've found. And you kind of look for partners that actually have the confidence to kind of take a risk, because really today, if you don't take a risk, I mean, that's the biggest risk, right? To stand out, you have to take risk. And actually, I found it pretty interesting that Coalesce, which is Steelcase's premium brand, when I started working with them, there was a beginning of a recession, and they were willing to take a risk on this product line, and they just wanted to rethink the conference room. And we had a lot of different ideas around how to make the conference room more collaborative, casual, and conversational, but they were a little bit too polarizing. But this one was just a simple insight. Let's just change the scale of everything. Let's lower everything, make it more just seem more lounge-like and more inviting, and some places you'd want to hang out all day. Change the proportions of the chair so you can actually move around in it. Get rid of all the adjustments that nobody uses because they usually eject and lay back. So it started off as a chair and a table brief, but turned into like a 3 chairs, ottoman, different accessories, and like 40-some tables. It was kind of a kit of parts. Which was a great project. And, I really owe a lot to Bob Arco, the VP of Design, who really was the design entrepreneur and champion on the inside of Steelcase, making sure that they invested in this project. Then there's other, entrepreneurs within big companies. This is Jay Allard, who I worked with before he left Microsoft. He was the guy who really instigated the first internet browser for Microsoft, then founded Xbox, then Zune, all to different different levels of success, I guess you would say, varying levels. But he was, a hardcore gamer, so that's why Xbox was successful. Zune was a great product or a great service, but they just didn't market it quite right. And then, this was a project that was probably one of my favorite projects of my career. And it was just the brief was like, can we do better than Kindle, when he got his Kindle? And it was like, well, what could we do that isn't a reader, that's for the cultural creative? Everybody has a notebook, and it was the Microsoft Courier, which probably a lot of people saw when it got leaked on the blogs. It was this notebook that blended analog and digital worlds, and was really essentially a digital moleskin. And this was like 2008 through 2010 that we did this work, and it was pre-iPad. It was the UI demos that are online are still, very heartbreaking to watch, I guess you would say, because this was more about creation and content creation than consumption, where the iPad started off as mostly consumption. And it got incredible reviews, and that was one of my goals when I started working for Microsoft. I was like, they're kind of like, all the haters jump on Microsoft. I was like, God, it'd be great just to design something that people were like, hey, that's pretty cool. And that was like my goal for working with Microsoft. And we actually accomplished that through a couple projects, even though this one didn't make it to production. And like I said, it was the most heartbreaking project in my career. But actually, it spawned a lot of interesting things, like Paper's design team came from that core team. Clibe, also, which is another software or another sketchbook app that just got acquired by Jawbone. Those are core team members of mine that went off and started their own app. And then, so Xbox actually made it out. And I think, as far as gambling on a technology, I was pretty impressed that Microsoft gambled the farm basically on Connect, because when you think about it, when you have a product line that's fairly successful, the previous generations, to bet on this interaction is quite a big gamble for a company. And it paid off. I wasn't actually really sure how well the consumers were going to accept it, but it ended up breaking all records as far as the fastest selling gadget. I'm sure the new iPad's going to break that though. And sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you don't expect them to make it, and they do. And like this was a Windows Mobile 7 phone that we did for Dell, and we proposed curved Gorilla Glass, which had never been done before, and all put the ports and switches where we thought they should be, and they handed it off over the wall, which we don't like to do. And then I was like, oh, that's never going to go anywhere. And then a year to the day almost, they walk in, they put it on the table, and it was like pre-production sample, and like everything was exactly where we put it, except for the pattern on the back was a little bit different. But you can't have all the win. You can't win every battle. But the curved glass was fantastic. Just the 0.75 millimeter raise in it after you've been touching flat glass for so long was like, wow, it's functional, but it just feels better and more sensual and more human, which was actually pretty interesting. It got incredible good reviews on Engadget, but then they went with T-Mobile, which pretty much sank the product, I think. So it can be one decision that kills a product. Like, if this was on AT&T, everybody on the blogs was like, why can't this be on AT&T or Verizon? So you're not in control, really. And then we do like speculative work quite a bit. Sometimes they go nowhere, like this chair. And we did some I'm really proud of the range of teapots that we did on our own, from low tech to high tech. This was just taking a simple teapot, cast aluminum, enameled coating, some simple insights, basically modernizing the icon, all the way to a little bit more high tech. And this one we actually patented, spent money to globally patent this. And it's essentially just an induction. Induction's good for heating water, right? Not so great for cooking, but that little thin disc on the bottom of the infuser stack there is really is stainless steel, and it heats up from within, so the bubbles start happening. You can see as a user what's happening. And then what's nice is like when you take it off the induction pad, it doesn't have the metal cladding on the bottom, so it's only as hot as the water is on the inside, versus if you take a pot off an induction pad, usually the pad is fine, but the cladding on the bottom is going to burn you. So that was a fun project. And then sometimes you never know. This was probably the third round of stuff we had done for Artimity over 3 years, and this was like the last thing I did the night before the presentation, and I just was like, okay, I'm not going to design the next Telemeo like they're asking me to, because that's just really honestly too hard. I'm going to design something I want to design, and how I would want to use LEDs, and something that's more of a hybrid table lamp / task lamp, and using LEDs in a new way. So that's a big light panel like a parasol that you can kind of articulate around. And it still has a memory to it, which I think is also important to objects that you design. It's like, if it's too far out there, maybe eventually society or consumers will catch up and they'll buy it. But if there's a memory, and if you think about it, there's table lamps have a base, a stem, and a light shade. This doesn't need a light shade anymore. But it doesn't look old, but at the same time, there's a memory to it, which I think is important. So the bottom line is you can't control the outcome unless you do it. So you got it, and that's why I like this balanced business of doing some of the stuff on our own, because that's where you get a lot of the gratification. When you have the other side, you have some heartbreaks here and there. So Startup 4 was actually inspired by my time with Nike ID, where we were looking at customization. I was trying to figure out how customization could actually complement supply chain versus be at odds with it, because when you're trying to pick how much pink leather, green leather, whatever that I need for a shoe, it's hard to estimate how much inventory and how much you have to buy. And I was like, why don't we just stock everything white and print the color on demand? And at that point, it just wasn't possible, or it was too much of a disruption to the supply chain at Nike. But then it was also complemented by people's desire to kind of be unique and express themselves, and on top of the fact that the iPhone was kind of this massive cultural phenomena at the time. And so what I ended up creating was Uncommon, which was essentially just putting, we'll create the one blank canvas or minimal blank canvases of these iPhone covers, and then we'll let the consumer decide what the style is, so we don't have to have this constant churn and burn of what the case would look like. And at first I did it, actually, to be honest, I did it for the money, because I was like, okay, we'll printing money on this thing, you know, and that's the wrong thing to do. But I was like, well, maybe if I do that, then I can, like, you know, save the world later and with the money I make. But it didn't turn out that way. But, you know, we did everything in 5 months from August to December, like including designing and engineering the cases, the packaging, the branding, the website, the CMS system for all the content, curating all the art, with luckily, thankfully, from help from Juxtaposed Magazine and Upper Playground. And then, and what else did we do? We put operations in Louisville next to UPS so people could get it in 2 or 3 days, so they didn't have to wait like 5 weeks like they did for Nike ID shoes. And so we did just about everything, including also commercializing the printing process. So we bought all these machines, and then it turned out they can only print on one type of plastic. So we were like, oh no, you know, it was like, so that was a mad, you know, we were like halfway through hell. Do we keep going, or, you know? So luckily we figured it out, and when we launched, most of the consumers were calling, or most of the calls on the customer service line were about from Burton and HP and Oakley, going, how did you guys do this in 5 months when we've spent all this money and all these people for years? And so the single, like, mass, you know, customized one-off mass customization is the code that we cracked, which was pretty interesting, and it allowed it to 3D wrap, which also people hadn't seen. And, you know, the machine itself was, we designed the machine itself, even though it didn't look anything like it. It actually looked more like an easy bake oven. But it was funny, so we were like, you know, just showing the competition. You know, we got some serious technology, right? My wife actually was like, wow, that's the machine. And I hadn't seen her in like a year and a half when I was incubating this thing. And I'm like, no, that's not the machine. That's just a visualization. But but she was pretty impressed with that. And doing the advertising, how do you stand out in Juxtaposed Magazine when you're, you know, every page is art? So we kind of took the artists that we had and took their favorite canvas and material, whether it's concrete or canvas, and put the case on there and had it wrap up around. We did it all digitally. So what was interesting about Uncommon was that, you know, it involved people in the creation of the project, which made them a brand advocate and a brand ambassador, which was fantastic. So that, you know, forget about all the advertising that you typically do. You just spread the brand by word of mouth. And we did some events too locally where people could actually take pictures of the art that was being made, and then download or get on the website and instantly make a case from the event, have it shipped to them. But what I learned with that, the good thing was, you know, it's amazing what you can actually do with a focused small team compared to the big companies that try to do the same exact thing. But don't underestimate the hours. I think I spent, at one point, I was doing my hours, and it was like 900 hours in 3 months. And, you know, I think it was broke 4,000 for the year when I was doing minimal and Uncommon at the same time. So definitely lost about a year and a half with my my daughter and family. And, you know, kind of generalizing here, but, you know, maybe not a good idea to partner with a lawyer unless you have another lawyer look over everything. So, yeah, so I kind of got pushed aside after creating all that. I kind of got pushed aside and I'm forced out of that company, and which was heartbreaking. And so but like 2 weeks later, I was like talking to my wife. I was like, I got this idea. And she's like, no more startups until next spring, please. And I was like, signed a coaster, drink coaster and everything. And then I was like, but I have this idea around this watch that I want to design. And I did a lot of watches. So she knew I was pretty good at watches from Nike days and knew them fairly well. And so I showed her this. I designed this. I want to give it to Encase. And she's like, oh yeah, no problem. You know, just do that. And they were going to give me, Encase was going to give me basically a royalty for the product. I think it was like 2% or something like that. And I was like, that's fine. It's better than it just dying on my shelf or in my notebook. And it was essentially, the project started off as just teaching myself SolidWorks, and I wanted to. It seemed like a good product to design, and so they backed out, and then I was like, and then I kind of floated it by Apple and a couple of retailers, like, what do you guys think? And they're like, nah, it's really cool, but I don't know, it won't sell for over $50. So Our sweet spot's $34.95. And I'm like, okay, so it's probably not going to be a high volume product. So what am I going to do with this thing? So then just about that time, I had noticed my friend, actually our graphic designer at Uber was actually, after he left Uber, the baby company, he actually went to Obama and he was creative director for Obama's campaign. And then afterwards, he did the Designing Obama book and raised $86,000 on Kickstarter. I was like, that's interesting. I wonder if you could do a product on there. And just about the time I was getting turned down by Incase, I ended up noticing the guys here in New York, the Glyph guys, kind of doing the thing. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Maybe I'll try that. It looks really simple to do. So why Kickstarter is like, one, I didn't have to use a partner. Simple. There's really no risk other than a little bit of my time. I went in there on a Sunday, made the video. I had the renderings done already. I had a prototype already. So I was like, and I was kind of curious what would happen if you put a commercial product on the platform and you use some of the same storytelling and things that we do with our clients, maybe not to that level, but we don't do things for Microsoft in one day. But it was like, we know how to do that stuff. So what if we did that, and how would the community react? And then basically, I had no money after Uncommon ended. I mean, I lost almost everything in that. So the goal was to raise $15,000. And we hope to and that was just to cover the tooling of the straps and the cases and the fixtures for the aluminum. But honestly, we needed something more like 45 to 60. But Yancey and the guys, well, put your goal at minimum to cover yourself in case you don't get it. And I'm like, or else you get nothing. So we did it 45 to 60. Or we did it at 15, and we were hoping for 45 to 60 to cover the minimum order quantities from the factory. And obviously, most of you've probably seen, it went crazy, and we were able to more than pay for everything. And it actually was funny because first day was only about $6,000 around 6 p.m. and I went to a bar down the street and to meet somebody to celebrate $6,000 in day one, and I got a text message from my wife saying it's at $24,000, and I'm like, no way, you're looking at the wrong project. And then she's like, now it's at 30. I'm like, so I get on my browser and I'm like, wow, what happened? And it showed up on Gizmodo right around 6 o'clock and just went nuts. So obviously that changed everything. It changed from a little experiment to like, okay, this is like a serious commitment in business. And, but also it started making me wonder, like, what am I doing killing myself for these big, long corporate clients when I can get an ROI, return on investment in 30 days of, not $1 million, but close to it. And, with very minimum effort up front. So in a way, we essentially kickstarted Kickstarter, which is great. That's probably one of my proudest things. Like, the watch is good. I'm getting kind of tired of it, and I'm kind of tired of telling the story, to be honest. But the fact that there's so many people doing stuff on this platform is probably what I'm most proud about. And glad to be there at the beginning, and maybe show a glimpse of what it could be like. And I mean, today, like. When I was actually in Asia just the last couple of weeks trying to do our second Kickstarter project, get it out in production, somebody hit $10 million for a e-paper watch that talks to your iPhone, which is amazing where this is going, right? So, a lot of people ask me about the formula for this, and, the stars aligned on this particular project, timing of year, the design obviously has, and design, a transformative design around a product that didn't have a home. Like, it was a very cool technological breakthrough as far as the watch industry was concerned, but they just had this thing in the clip. But what am I going to do with another multi-touch device in my life? And this gave it a home. So, and a lot of people saw something different. Some people saw this like new way to raise money. Other people saw the Dick Tracy watch that they always wanted when they were a kid. So it spanned generations as well. We had all kinds of users, way outside the watch geeks and the fanboys that I thought were only going to buy this thing. And it was, in the end, it was more than the product. It was a new way, I think, that really enticed everybody. So then, the other thing that kind of fueled it along the way too was this participation, that people were involved in the process, and we were putting updates, and they felt like they had a behind the scenes kind of look into how a product is actually made. And I think you see every video now has a little bit of that on there on the Kickstarter thing. And we more often heard that the journey was more important than the actual destination. So we just posted an update right before I came on stage here about we have to delay the pen a little bit longer because they screwed up the tooling, and it's like going to ship next week instead. But everybody's like, oh, this is great. I like to see the stories, and I like to see the screwed up tip. And it's like, so they like the, as long as you're honest, it's very important. So that transparency is important that I found in our project, and it humanizes the brand, and it brings the user closer to the brand. I think a lot of companies have forgotten how to do that. Everything's like so secret. So but I think Kickstarter is also influencing the way companies talk to consumers in general. And then, whether you're a big company or us, I think you even hear it from our corporate clients that instant global validation that happens is amazing, much better than focus groups. Like, there's nothing more validating than somebody putting the credit card down for something that doesn't exist. It's just a rendering or a prototype. So, classically, focus groups are like, I like the red boombox or red stereo, and then you call, outside the focus group room, and you're like, okay, thanks for participating. Here's your check, and you get one of these products for free because you participated, and they picked the black one. I was like, so they classically do the opposite of what they say, and so with this, putting a credit card down, it's pretty serious. So I think it's interesting, and it also is in some ways is sustainable because if it doesn't succeed, then you're not making the product, whereas a lot of companies are making products that really people don't really need or are flawed because of focus groups or somebody else's opinion in the company. And one of the other things that we found out was this niche products aren't that niche anymore when you're talking about attaching to the iPhone and especially with these new tools and digital platforms that allow you to access these special interest groups and the way they spread the word among those special interest groups. So you can make a fairly profitable little business just by targeting these little niche groups. So, and this was an interesting stat too, when it came time to go to retail. One of the questions that we asked at the end of the campaign was like, how many of you guys bought the Nano because of the watch band? They had no intention of buying the Nano before, and it was like 76%. I thought it was going to be in the 20s, 30s, because I was monitoring the boards, and I was like, wow. So obviously that made it a lot easier to kind of go to retailers, and it was much more of a pull effect because in the end of the day, the buyers, whether you're Apple store or Best Buy or a small retailer, they lack confidence in some ways too. They want to make sure that the product's going to sell. So this global validation, this is going to be a success. So, and plus stats like that, we're like, wow, we're going to sell nanos for you as well. I think that's a phenomenon though that maybe can't be replicated. It's very rare that an accessory sells the core product. And there's also a lot of tools out now too that allow you to get the product out to people, and that complement small companies. Goodsy is like a storefront, simple storefront web site, web app, and then there's Shipwire, that's a fulfillment company. Does a lot of Kickstarter fulfillment, I believe, and as well as even Jawbone, I think, as well. Fulfillment by Amazon, you can't beat their prices. Zendesk and Sicily are more customer service tracking softwares that are nice as well for a small company. And then there's things like PayPal and Square, right, which, to be honest, it's kind of addictive. Like if you get a text message every time you get somebody buying something, and it's like, wow, it's like, versus the old days where you were a designer, you're getting a royalty, and you'd wait for the end of the quarter. Maybe you'll get a report on how many of your products sold, and you're kind of in the dark. But yeah, interesting what they're doing. Square processed $4 billion in payments last year. So, and it's enabled small, even bands that used to sell $200, $300 worth of merch in a night. Now they're selling thousands because they can do it right on the spot. So, and like I said, the biggest, most impressive thing for me was that this is the global inspiration that happened here and allowed creatives to raise money. Mainly that they didn't have to give up control and equity. Control and equity in the company, because a lot of times you see a good idea, a designer or inventor do something, and then they go and raise money and they kind of lose control right out of the gate, right? So this is maybe you can maintain control all the way through, or at least get you out of the gate before you go for your second round of funding, and then maybe, but at least you're out of the gate and you've got something proven in the market, and you probably are going to be able to maintain more equity in your company and more control. So the flip side, so like I said, don't underestimate the amount of work. Definitely under-promise, over-deliver. I see that happening. I even did it with the first program. I said, I'll get it to you by Christmas. No way. And we did it in like 90 days from the start of the project, which is actually a record anyways. Like, I don't even think I can replicate that. We were globally fulfilled like 95% with like 20,000 products to over 50 countries in 90 days, which from the start of the project, and 60 days from the close of the project. Everything, like I said, aligned. It just was very lucky. But you should expect trouble. There's people out there that are lurking, opportunistic, and, we're in a country where people can sue for anything. We got sued out of the gate for something frivolous. We could have beat it, but it was like they wanted a ridiculous amount of money, and we were like, because they saw $1 million, they wanted 100,000. I'm like, no, we'll give you 10 to go away and not bother us, and then they ended up taking that. But then I got back. I was like, actually, it ruined the end of my family vacation, spring break with my family, because we got a cease and desist from Kesha saying that we disrespected her name and the song TikTok, and that they wanted all our books and all our inventory and extreme damages. And I was like, oh, come on. And then but luckily my lawyers were like, it's probably not even her, it's probably her lawyer. So let's respond. And so we wrote her back and said, Dear Kesha, we'll see you in court. Less so they immediately dropped it, and and they were getting bad press for picking on the little guy too. And you can't trademark a song anyways. There was like 2 other TikTok songs and 2 other genres of music anyways at the time. So along the same lines, like, be thorough, make sure you surround yourself with people that you can trust, and don't want it so bad that you're careless. I think that's a really big. Sometimes I've made bad decisions in the past, like, oh, it's just too good to be true, and we got to go to do this, and it's you should be careful. There's a lot of people, more and more, because as more and more design is seen as a value, there'll be more and more people trying to take advantage of designers, and so just be careful. And hire A gamers, right? Because you want to hire people that make your job easier, not that make your job harder, and you have to go back and redo stuff. So be careful about cutting corners on, I'd rather have one person that's more expensive than a bunch of people that are less, and especially that one person is very diverse and, can wear a lot of hats. And network, where if you can't hire the person, network, because there's a lot of people out there that have done it and have good advice. And I think the bottom line is, like, have fun, do it for the right reasons, or don't do it, and be passionate about it, or don't do it. I think one thing that, my GM doesn't like me showing, but I think it's very educational, like, because there's a perception of, like, everything over $15,000 is in my pocket. So I think, a good chunk of the $1 million, $360,000 went to the cost of goods of actually just getting. It wasn't, the 1,500 watches I thought I was going to sell. It's actually over 20,000. So I had to pay the factory there. Fulfillment charges. At that point, and actually still, Kickstarter doesn't verify addresses. So, you have to verify addresses to ship globally and get telephone numbers and stuff. So we had about $70,000 in just contractor and services to try to, like, validate and verify addresses and deal with fulfillment screw-ups. Just design and development, further trips to refine stuff, as well as just prototypes and things like that. We had Kickstarter takes their cut, $47,000 it was roughly. Amazon takes their cut, even though it won't animate. Oh, it did. $28,000 there, and then the legal stuff ended up costing us started miscellaneous stuff, and then legal stuff ended up costing us about $50,000. And then in the end, we had about $270,000 of profit, but the next order to the factory, the next PO to the factory exceeded that, so I had to take a loan for, another $100,000 to be able to cover the next PO. So really the money was already gone. If I just wanted to cut the business off and be done and never offer that product again, it could have had a pretty good profit, but you kind of roll that in to invest it back into the business. So that's where we are today. I've got stuff that's happening in the future here, or happening right now. We've got a few more minutes, so maybe I'll just go through it real quick. Since we were going just as fast as we could, I branded the stuff very quickly, and then we came back and just recently rebranded it. Lunatic.com was available, so we ended up grabbing that. Back in the day, that was a sign that we should call it Lunatic, I think, because it's really hard to find domains. It's become a kind of a global, viral brand, multi-products now at this point, and we've kind of launched our follow-up product on Kickstarter as well, and we plan to do the next one on Kickstarter. To date, we've sold about 300,000 TikToks and Lunatics to over 100 countries in just over a year. We started expanding the line to have fun, like the CMYK collection, which was just the TikTok. Our best-selling units are actually our most expensive units, which always continues to defy logic. It was like $129 and $139 for the all-black one. They sell more than any of the other units we have. There's just some different view of the line. Last fall when we thought they were going to change, they classically change the iPod every fall. So every accessories company is like, oh my God, what are we going to do with all this when they change? We have to design new cases. We have to start slowing up on the inventory and liquidating the inventory of the old stuff. So with $700,000 in inventory at that point last fall, and millions in retail, I was like, well, what can we do from a creative business and design standpoint? So I actually had a watch factory. It was a Nixon watch factory that was making the watch band to begin with, just to make a simple analog watch that could fit where the Nano was, so that essentially we could just sell down inventory slowly, obviously not at the rate of the Lunatic, and minimize our losses on that. And luckily they didn't change the Nano, and so it gave us a Christmas and another year. But there was enough people that wanted that we ended up making this, and we only made about 5,000. I think we're about out at this point, but it's kind of cool. It's waterproof, so whereas the Nano isn't. And of course, we hope that they come out with something here in next fall where it's low power Bluetooth and allows you to have caller ID and simple essential like kind of information on your wrist, which is coming. I mean, other like Moto Active's doing it. Obviously, we hope that they do it the best, and we're there and we can actually draft off that. The pen itself was actually a simple insight, kind of going back to the courier days of, I work in a moleskin and I work on a tablet, and I carry two different things with me, a stylus and a pen. So why can't we combine the two? And it was like, we were like, well, why can't the pen come through the rubber tip? And like, oh, I wonder if that's patentable. And it was a patentable idea that we ended up, nothing's a sure thing. We won't know for like 2 years, but it's in there. It looks good, looks clear. We got people, everybody from Samford on up to Moleskine, talking to us about licensing it, which is also an interesting scenario as well when you talk about the volume of Samford and some of the other pen brands. But I think we're going to get our pen out of the gate at first, and establish some awareness around it, and then go from there and see what happens. We're about ready to launch some protection, and it's definitely a niche product, but it's kind of an outdoor durable product that actually will probably be launching in Kickstarter soon, I think. So you got a preview before anybody else. One of the other things I'm really excited about, and this was about a year ago, I had this idea when we were getting a lot of feedback from our fans and Luna and owners of the product, that they were saying, like, I get so many people stopping me with this watch and asking me about it, and I've probably sold 12 this month, and I've even printed out, multiple people say I printed out lunatic.com cards so they remember where to get it. It's like, I should be paying these people. And so what we're working on is a kickback app, essentially, and it will start off as Lunatic kickback app, and we'll eventually white label it to other brands. But if somebody stops you and asks you and you want to make some money, you pull up the Lunatic kickback app, you give me your email address, I'll shoot it over to you. If you buy it through that email, then you get 10% off and I get 10% commission, and there's total transparency. You'll see what your running commissions are. And we think that could go quite big as far as if you think about digital Tupperware, right? It's like, and it'd be great if you were like, hey, I like Incase, I like Lunatic, I like this baby brand, and like, you can actually be a sales rep anywhere in the globe for our things, and we're going to be shipping direct out of Asia, global fulfillment, and out of Europe as well. So it could be interesting. And of course, then we're also talking to companies like PayPal about this idea too, which they were like, they were just really quiet when I first told them the idea. So we'll see how that goes. They were like, "This is really cool." So on the outside of our own products, we actually do a lot. We were starting to do more stuff with startups where we're actually taking. What's nice about Lunatic is that it takes a little pressure off the consulting side. So you can be more selective about the jobs you take. You can actually maybe invest and take risks with some things that maybe are a little bit more meaningful. And we've been doing a lot of stuff with in the MedTech area. Surface-Side is a company that we're actually a major, majority investor in at this point, and it's around a problem that's growing, and maybe the public isn't completely aware of it. I think people have heard about it, but in hospital rooms, and this goes into prisons and gyms and public trans as well, but it's really hot right now in healthcare. The 30% to 70% of the surfaces go unclean, and we're having a major problem with healthcare-acquired infections. And essentially, you have a 5% chance if you go into the hospital of acquiring one of these things, and it may kill you. And more people are dying every year from this than the leading to causes of cancer, leading to cancers. So. We're looking at right now, state of the art is bleach, wiping down surfaces with bleach. So we're working with UV light to try to kill these bugs at a cellular level. Killing MRSA, we're right now in trials. MRSA, no problem. C. diff is a very hard bug to kill. We're killing it, but not as fast as we want. But so we're working on developing it over the next half of the year. So hopefully we'll be in production and in hospitals, I guess, by the end of the year. And then another, my mother died of a sudden coronary event when I was 19 and she was 51, so extremely young, and so that was very much, I'm very sensitive to that, and I had just found out that my daughter had ASD, which is a hole in the heart. Luckily, it's clear, since then is closed up. But when Marie came in to talk to me about AUM cardiovascular, she was she was a Stanford grad, 3M fellow, and she had discovered, unfortunately, through her husband, who she was developing another product with, and he was like a college athlete and swam 4 times a week. And then at 41, he just died from a sudden cardiac arrest in his truck one morning. Being the engineer, she had to figure out why after she recovered from the shock. So she figured out a way to identify any blockages, coronary blockages, in like 20 seconds and quantifiably identify. In fact, one of her first 3 investors tested positive. He freaked out, went to the cardiologist, did the echocardiogram, the stress test, all the tests, and the doctor was like, the cardiologist was like, "You're fine." He went out to Palm Springs to go golfing 2 weeks later. He's like, "Oh my God." Went back in, they missed an 80% blockage that she had identified. She thought her credibility was shot, but then it turned out that she actually caught it. So it's going to be like a screening device, and I think it would, hopefully eliminate these kinds of deaths. So, what's next? We're also looking at launching more Lunatic products, which I described. A new collaborative app, which is going to be pretty cool. We're pretty excited about that, and some minimal branded products, and that's it, really.
Scott, that was a great presentation. Thank you. Actually, there's something else I want to congratulate you on, and that is the fact that Scott is the winner of the Smithsonian's Cooper-Hewitt National Design Awards this year in the product design category. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I found out when I was on the road, and I was just by myself, and I had nobody to celebrate with, so we'll celebrate tonight maybe over a drink.
Sounds like good. And put aside a couple of dates on July the 13th will be the White House.
Okay.
Lunch at the White House, hosted by the First Lady.
Wow.
And then on October the 17th will be the big event in New York City. So we'll see you for both those. That's really wonderful.
Yeah, it's exciting. My wife, I'm sure, is going to be really excited.
Yeah,
about
it should be there
well,
too,
yeah.
I hope. The thing that strikes me about his presentation is that it's not a fluke. He didn't actually just get lucky with this Kickstarter thing. There's this whole lifetime of skills and expertise, and it takes a long time to get really good at these things. And eventually something does come together,
Sure.
and there's an element of luck to that perhaps, but there's also an incredible combination of skills and experience and wisdom that makes this whole thing possible. So for all of us who'd like to do the same thing, it's a bit sad, really, isn't it? But at the same time, we love it, we admire it. But anyway, I'd like to go back to the beginning. I'd like ask you a couple of questions about how you got going. I mean, when did you first decide you wanted to be a designer?
Well, I was fortunate enough that my father studied architecture at Syracuse, but when he graduated, and while he was there, they were just starting the industrial design program, so he kind of was intrigued by the whole thing. And when he came out of school, he was the economy was bad for architects, so he was luckily multi-talented in graphic design, illustration, photography, so he ended up getting into creative fields, working a lot in D.C. with NASA on exhibits and space basically experiential design down there. And then, so he always had stuff around the house. I was always like, my first big boy book was like Rapid Viz, which was really just communication sketching, not really fine art. And I liked to take things apart. And I was, I liked math and physics, but I also like, art as well. And my art teacher wanted me to be an illustrator or a graphic designer. My guidance counselor, an engineer. Luckily, he had knowledge of industrial design, because back then nobody really knew about it. And
so he told you about it, did he?
Yeah, he had ID magazine laying around the house and stuff.
Did he want to be industrial design instead of an architect?
I think he was intrigued by it. Yeah, he was like playing around with like mail chutes for the postal inspection service, going from metal to fiberglass and different things like that back in the day as well. So he was kind of interested in that.
And did you get any education in high school to that effect, or was it not until you went to college?
Not too much, just technical drafting. Really, it wasn't.
It was more from home, basically.
More from home. I was always drawing and sketching.
And then what did you study?
RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology.
Right,
so.
right.
I looked at a couple different schools, narrowed it down to University of Cincinnati and RIT. Cincinnati is a great school. I mean, I don't know. I have no regrets given where I am right now, but, I think if I could have went there, it would have been great. But I wanted to play baseball, and they just didn't. Division I versus Division III was like a huge time commitment. And, I think I ended up just playing ball and balancing studies with baseball. And
well, Cincinnati has this unique, what we call a sandwich course, where you get the bread and the filler. Yeah. And so they send you out every 6 months to do an internship.
Yeah, it's
and you come back, and it's a 4-year program because it goes on longer for that.
RIT told me they had that too, but they didn't really.
They didn't?
No, but that was and my father was a big advocate of the internship program, so that's definitely why those two schools were front.
And was there a moment in time when you decided, I can do this?
I was like I mentioned about my mother passing away. I think when I first went to school, I partied a lot, and I was probably
baseball and
risk.
Nothing else.
I was a risk of. I was even missing practice, and I was just like. But I even got instructors telling me like your raw talent, you're not using it, And but then when my mom passed away, I definitely something switched and I got serious. And I think I think at that point when I really applied myself, and then I immediately somebody one of the firms in town asked me to come in to I kind of work during the week and during the summer, and I ended up by the time I was done, I was probably working a bulk of the school year or the semester at this firm and just going into kind of when I needed to in school. So I was getting a lot of real world experience, kind of like an internship right at the point. And I guess, along the way you hit these plateaus of realization like, I can do this, I can take it to the next level. And it was kind of a weird, or a not planned, but just a serendipitous kind of track where I went consulting, corporate, consulting, corporate, consulting, corporate. And each time at a different level and different, ability to learn a different aspect of design, and each time like it was like somebody would empower me along the way, and I think IDEO was.
I was glad you went to IDEO twice, but what about the third time?
No, I didn't come back. I almost came back. Well, when I moved back from Nike, I was like, I can go to work at Motorola for wearable technology. I can go to IDEO a third time, or I can start my own thing. And I was like, I can't go back to IDEO a third time. I can't because everybody bet that I would come back a third time, but. Actually, it would have been a better, maybe a more enjoyable choice than Motorola. But I learned a lot at Motorola, even though it was kind of a tough culture. And it was.
And did you win any competitions or awards early in your career, and when you're still a student or anything?
There was some awards scattered, like in the first 10 years, at Thompson and I think IDEO even, and and then at the stapler, ACO, the Fortune Brands office products, we won a bunch of awards. That was kind of, taking an old stodgy industry and actually, you take a catalog with 10,000 SKUs in it, and every day you could try to improve something, right? So it was like, and that was with Tim Parsi, who actually, and then, interesting, like every time I made a jump, I had a different responsibility that actually allowed me to kind of get a diverse and range of experience. And can't complain about the experience jumping. In the beginning, in the 90s, people were like, I can't believe you're changing jobs every year and a half. And like but today that's kind of normal. But I would work really hard, and I think I never burned a bridge along the way because people were grateful about the amount of work I put in. And I just would change when there was a new opportunity in somewhere else where I felt like I was plateauing and learning, and I felt like there was another exciting thing that I had to go tackle, a challenge.
So, give us a few tips about what makes a talented designer. It's obvious you have to work hard. There's a lot of stuff that just takes time. You said that 99% versus the 1%, the sweat versus the inspiration. And one realizes that anything that's a doing kind of thing, there's a lot of time spent actually doing. Yeah. But then what is the sort of designer mentality as opposed to somebody who's more business-oriented or more artistic?
I guess it's just the way you look at things, because I see like opportunity in everything, and that's actually a weakness because I want to help everybody that walks through the door, even though I probably shouldn't even be entertaining some of these people because they don't have their stuff buttoned up. But I think, and I'm trying to get some people around me now that try to keep me from trying to help everyone. But when you see opportunity in everything and you're curious, I think that's a major part of being a designer, right? And and then, combine that with passion, hard work, and then usually, and I always believe that there's a solution, right? So I'm optimistic about that.
There's always a better one.
Yeah.
There's never the right one, of course. There's always a better one.
Right, exactly.
And that's a little worrying, too.
Yeah.
So what was your first job?
First job was the consultancy I started working with when I was a sophomore in university, and called Keck Associates in upstate New York. And it was a small regional firm that really just was, at the time when I started, was just doing medical products for MDT and a couple other companies, and it was mostly sheet metal work and stuff like that. But by the time I left in 3 years, we had Thompson, Xerox, Kodak, Fisher-Price, and different
that's a good client list.
Yeah, it was pretty good. And it was really, just a handful, like 3 of us designers, really. And then, at one point they hired one of my best friends, and when I was thinking about leaving, so I ended up staying another year and a half. But it was good because you were they didn't have, mostly a model shop fabrication and some design, and we turned them into a full-on design firm. And you weren't a backroom designer; you were actually given a lot of responsibility. So.
Yes.
And then they ended up turning into like the kind of regional firm up there, and when all the other ones kind of went away.
And what was it like working at Nike?
Nike, that was Nike is. The culture there is incredible. It's like a family. It's like, a college campus. And, you imagine amazing college campus with a bunch of young, pretty open-minded,
and mostly very athletic
colleagues. And, and not everybody is, but, it's they definitely have that work-life balance, and it's like if somebody schedules a meeting and your gym time is like 1 to 2 and you're not at the meeting, nobody's, he's at the gym, or whatever like that. So, they're respectful of the work-life balance. And then as far as the culture, you have Mark Parker, who's now the CEO, who happened to be our boss for my last 3 years before he was, before they kicked out Bill Perez, which was from S.C. Johnson, which was just a culture misfit, right? And then they made Mark a CEO, but I got to work for him the last 3 years I was at Nike. And talk about a right-brained kind of big picture, kind of connected to consumer CEO. He's like one of the few. And so working with those people is fantastic, And then they actually were talking to me for about 6 months about opening a Chicago satellite studio when I was leaving IDEO the second time. And I just once I visited the campus and saw the material libraries and all the facilities, it was like, I got to be here. And, that's when my wife started crying. But she knew I had to go. It was fantastic.
And then,
it definitely, whereas IDEO and everybody taught me the process and user-centered design, Nike opened my eyes about how the bigger brand operates and how you talk to consumers, I think. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. But then Motorola was a bit of a shock, was it?
Yeah, they wanted everything I did at Nike. Like, we want this end-to-end experience, and but then you get in there, you'll just do the plastics, and somebody else will do the human factors and say where the button goes and how the fit is, and then you'll never meet a packaging engineer or a packaging designer. And it was very. I think maybe it's changed now, but at that time it was very compartmentalized, and I just couldn't do it. You just can't go backwards once you kind of do the end-to-end stuff.
They also seem to have had a history, anyway, of going for the big leap forward rather than the little fail steps.
Yeah, I mean, they had amazing product, the StarTAC, and then the Razor, and then but then they get really the thing that they fell into, and I think they're doing much better now. Thank God for Android, right? But is that they get very comfortable with success. And I just want another Razor. I just want another Razor. So you just hear that all the time. And, yeah.
Yeah, I was fascinated with what you said about bending the Gorilla Glass.
Yeah.
Remembering the movie Objectified, and thinking of Johnny Ive, where he shows you that making the design for a laptop is so much about understanding the method of manufacture and the feeling of the material and the way things you can do with a machine tool.
Yeah.
And this reminded me, you're talking about that Gorilla Glass as kind of a driver for the design. You think that sort of understanding of manufacturing process and materials is like in your soul, or is that something you've learned?
I think so, and it's definitely, you need access and you need the opportunity to see that stuff. Some places don't have that or give you that opportunity. But yeah, I just got back from like 7 out of the last 8 weeks I've been traveling around, and it's kind of the most brutal travel schedule I think I've ever done. But I was in Milan and Frankfurt for the furniture fair and the lighting fair, and I was in New York for the Edison Awards and stuff like that. And you see all this great design. I was hanging out with Tony Fidel from Nest and everything like that. It's great, fantastic stuff. But I actually get more inspired those 2 weeks I was in China, seeing all these materials and processes. A lot of times it's bad stuff that they just don't. It's great process. They just not using it right, and you think about different ways that you could use that, and I get more inspired by seeing the raw stuff than I do the finished stuff. I mean, it's great stuff, but
so he's been everywhere in the last month, and I was almost late because I couldn't get down from 91st Street. So should we have some questions? There's a mic here, and please remember, if you'd like to come up and ask a question, make a comment, that we're streaming, so please give your name and where your affiliation is and before you start, so that people who are watching us online can hear that. And while we're waiting for the first person to come up, I'll just mention that our next Bill's Design talk is on June 14th, which will be Walter Hood, who's a wonderful landscape architect who practices in San Francisco. So I hope you come for that one as well. So who's going to say something?
No questions.
There must be a first person. Yeah, you have to go around and be at the mic, otherwise the people who are being streamed at can't hear you.
Hi. Emil is my name. Thanks for showing us what means a great, successful designer. What makes a successful product?
What makes a successful product? I think that's a tough question, but I think from balance, I think you need to, I've always been a big advocate of balance in design. My design, I've been trying to keep things that are balancing, it's kind of like being a chef, I guess, right? You've got all these inputs and influences and research coming from all different disciplines of marketing and user research and business and manufacturing, and you can't take everything at 100%. You kind of have to figure out what percentages are right, because you never would want to eat anything that was 100% of every ingredient, right? So I think, and companies that tend to do that tend to have products that don't really connect emotionally with consumers, and I think it's great to have that kind of balance that, the design magazines want to write about it, but, the mass market really kind of resonates with it. And I also think that if you can make something that appeals emotionally, whether it's through the aesthetics or the promise or the UI or whatever, that's great. That's the first attraction to a product, but then you have to have a lot more substance behind it. It's kind of like dating, you date a lot of people, but if there's nothing behind the facade, then the relationship doesn't ever really go anywhere. So over time, you find out more about that product, and you become more dependent on it or more in love with it. And I think it's I think a lot of times people look at our products and they're like, oh, they're beautiful. Actually, I had one potential client say, well, we don't work with style houses too much, and I'm like, ow, I was like, well, you don't do 3 to 5 startups and do long-lasting products if you're just a style house, right? I'm glad they look good, and I'm glad you like them. But so I think it really comes down to balance and really listening to all the parties, not just the user, not just marketing, not just
all the stakeholders.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be a balance, and sometimes it's more important to listen to the consumer, the marketing, and more often than not. But and then there's all the stakeholders, there's the buyers. Like the threshold to the consumer is the buyer and the channel, and being able to and that's one of the nice things about going through all these different types of design, from corporate to consulting to startup, is that you can almost speak the language of any of these people, the stakeholders. Like you've been there, you know what retailers, the different pressures they go through, and if you can talk their talk, then they kind of they get on board with you, and it definitely is an art of compromise along the way and trying to get the right product out to market. But I think it's balance and listening and trying to figure out, I don't know where clarity comes from, but I think it's through experience and instinct and your gut, which is essentially, and then you just kind of know what the right formula is. Not always, but I've been lucky. I guess I've stayed away from the stinkers. And
well, you described some failures, which is good, I think, because that allows us to see that it's not every time. It's one has to admit the thing that it's not.
And a great product.
Sometimes
a great product's not enough if you don't have the other aspects. If you don't have the distribution and whatever like that, then a product that isn't so good, that has distribution and has some marketing dollars, that may win out. It's not always the best product that wins either.
Right.
Hi, my name's Kathleen McGuire. I'm with Round Arch Isobar. And ideals aside, you talked about going end to end. How committed are you within each stage of that end to end to being green?
Now it's a lot easier than, we used to, even at Nike, we used to get criticized and we couldn't even talk about it because some state would sue us because we were just trying to sell more shoes or something like that. But it's interesting, back not too long ago, it was really tough because it didn't, just like customization didn't really complement supply chain, green didn't, and you had to get the whole organization on. But today it's a lot easier. It's a little tougher with the on the consulting side because you're not making the final choices. You can suggest things, and we're always looking for new materials, new ways to do things. But it's over packaging and everything like that. We always try to consider the simplest way because even in consumer electronics, we try to do the minimal products or minimal packaging that we can on our products. But at the end of the day, you have to balance that with telling a story and being able to retailers have rules, but you play within the constraints, and you're just okay, how can I eliminate as much plastic or as much content here as possible? And you do the best you can. It's everybody. I think every designer that's got a good conscience is trying to do the most green thing possible. And I was just on the email earlier today because we give out a lot of samples because it's the cheapest way to marketing of our new pen. And I'm and they were coming in retail packaging, and I was it's really minimal. It's just a box inside of a lid for the metal one, and just a tent card for the smaller one or the plastic one. But then I was but what about all the promos we hand out? And they're we'll just give it on retail packaging. I was no, I just want a simple little mini pocket protector that people can use after the fact, and it tells a story, and I just give it out, because I don't want to throw away. Because on the watch we were throwing away, I don't want to travel with these full retail packages, so we put them in Ziploc bags, but we're throwing away that box. I'm I don't want to do that. So it's you're running at the speed of business, but you're also trying to make the right choices. So that's a very difficult question. I think we try to make the right choices along the way and do the best we can. And
it's really
try
a
to
plague for industrial designers, isn't it? Because
it's tough because you feel guilty about making more stuff that the world doesn't need all the time. You're does the world really need this? And how can we do this in a more
when I was still with IDEO, I ran a thing called IDEO Lab, and one of the first projects we did was to look at a laptop. And try and understand how everything in the laptop was made and how you could make it sustainably. And the result was it's pretty impossible. You know, if you think of all those different chips and printed circuit boards and so on that go into making one of those devices, coming from all over the world, being shipped all over the world, with all these chemicals that are necessary to make the electronics, it's a very, very difficult thing to achieve a goal like that and still be green.
Yeah, and I think one of the first steps is just make something that is going to last, so that people don't throw it away like next season or, in 3 months.
Yeah, wearing in rather than wearing out.
Yeah, and I think that's nice. Or they keep it. Like, how many products besides Apple do you hand down anymore that are tech products? I gave my old iPod to my dad, and I give it, he's
well,
like
Moore's law is against you with tech stuff,
yeah.
isn't it? Because it gets 10 times better every 2 years, which is unfair, really.
Yeah, it's true.
It's not good for handing down to your son or something like that.
Yeah.
We have another comment here.
Hi, my name is Nathan Gabriel. I work for Lifetime Brands. During the development of Lunatic and TikTok, I guess when you were about to pitch it to Encase, what level of protection did you take to preserve the IP or the design of that watch, and were you worried about Encase stealing it or trying to replicate it?
I actually didn't take any protection at that point. They were friends of mine from Nike that I had worked with previously, and I knew the founders from back in IDEO, Joe Tan, IDEO days. So I was like, "Hey, you guys like
and
this
Marcus,
thing?"
Yeah.
And Marcus,
Good friends.
So I trusted them, but I don't know if I was pitching it to somebody else, but it was like one of those things like, "Hey, it's a 1-year product because they'll change the Nano next year." I was like, "Just get it out there, give me a little royalty, it'll be fine." And but in other products, we are like the pen. We definitely we're like, that's a more universal product. Unless they change the screen technology, we should probably make sure that we can get that patent in, because that could be one of those patents that, you're collecting a penny off every Sanford pen, in the future. Who knows, It could be interesting, yeah. But I recommend talking to somebody for advice of whether it's worth the investment or not.
Hi, my name is Heidi Jock. I'm based in Argentina. I'm an industrial designer. And my question for you is, how do you approach the producers? How do you approach them?
Manufacturers or the contract manufacturers? Well, I first started meeting a lot of them at my corporate jobs, because you go farther down the line into production, visiting the factory. So you start collecting a lot of contacts, and you try to stay in touch with them even if you leave the job. And if you did a good product that sold a lot of products, they always want to talk to you after, because Scott made a very high volume product for us before, and so you end up having a reputation with the suppliers too. And then honestly, you got like when I did the watch, I honestly didn't want to use the Nike suppliers because they were good, but they would either be slow or they would miss holiday or different seasonal dates when I was at Nike, and I was like, I got all these people that are counting on me to deliver this thing in 60 days, and I was like, I need somebody that's reliable and is going to hit this date. And fortunately, I again, through network, I talked to somebody that used to work at Nixon and who also worked at Nike and was currently back at Cinco that does all the Nixon watch designs. I was like, hey, can you give me a name, somebody you really trust? And it was a guy, an old watchmaker that had kind of retired, but his company was making all the Nixon stuff, but he actually came out of retirement and project managed the whole thing, and that's one of the reasons why the thing went so seamlessly. But it's either through experience of going through other past jobs, or it's getting easier and easier to like ask people. You just like, and then we actually found a couple supply chain partners over in Asia. One group that used to work for Encase and PCH International that they basically ship and develop a lot of the Apple first-party products. And then also this other group that does a lot of work for a lot of the accessories groups. And they're kind of like in between. They're Irish, and so there's less of a language barrier, and they run around the factories. One of them grew up in Hong Kong. His father was in the police, Hong Kong police, since 1975. So he's very well connected, knows the area and a lot of the people very well. So finding people that you can trust and rely on is kind of, and they'll give you referrals, but it's getting easier and easier. There's other services like Alibaba and stuff like that. a little tougher to judge whether you can trust someplace or not. But
I always advise younger people to just go to the places where these things are being manufactured nowadays. And that's become very global, of course, because of the internet connectivity and the fact you can do that, and whereas it used to be relatively local. And I think that same thing that you talked about with growing up in a family with your father being an architect, you know, you got drawing and designing in your blood. You saw it happening around you.
Right.
But so many people here in the West, and nowadays they might go through design school and never actually visit a manufacturing plant because most of those are too far away.
Yeah.
And unless you take the trouble to actually go there and see what it's really like, then you don't have that intuitive understanding of how it all works.
Absolutely.
Some
Yeah,
of those things
I
are
would
local.
highly recommend if you have the means to get over there, and you don't want to go over there dry. You want to have a connection that can take you around and show you a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
It's very eye-opening. Like you'll see good and bad stuff.
And as designers, we always rely on intuition, so you need to have it kind of in your back of your mind rather than looking it up, so that you really sort of appreciate the possibilities.
But you never know, like bartering and there's obviously Asia and China especially is like really on the design kick right now and trying to learn more. And you probably could hey, I'll come over and I'll show you what I know and teach you if you can bring me around and show me some of your contacts. And there's probably some kind of exchange thing that you could probably work out for sure.
We have another one. I think it's the last question.
I'm Jason Chang. I'm a high school student, and I'm taking Innovative Design as a art class. And my question was, what was your reactions when products that you created, like the Microsoft Courier, which I was personally a big fan of, when I saw it, and what was your reaction when you learned that Microsoft just shut down the program and other Dell Venue? How did you feel when you felt like it didn't reach what you wanted?
I mean, like I said, the Courier thing was shocking because it actually become a religion within Microsoft. It had so much momentum. I'd never been on a project that everybody said yes, yes, yes all the way through. It was an incredible project. And then until the big no at the end. And it was just, it was a decision. Maybe it's the right decision. Maybe it wasn't because they wanted to focus on Windows 8, which is looking promising. But, it was heartbreaking, though, to get that far and, and then have it. I'm trying to remember where I was when I got the news, but one of my closest internal partner called me, and I could hear it in his voice. Something was wrong, and he went out there and started Paper now. And Paper's doing really well. They had 1.5 million downloads their first 2 weeks in the App Store, and they're doing fairly well. So there's life after Courier, and I think hopefully it just inspires a lot of stuff within Microsoft that will be coming out in the future.
Well, that's a rather sad story to end on. I think we have to...
One more.
We have to remember the story you told about being at the bar and getting this information about the Kickstarter coming through at this incredibly accelerating pace. So why don't we finish with that? Thank you very much.